Welcome to the Wonderful Therapist podcast. I am Juan Gutierrez, your host and associate clinical social worker, working under the supervision of a licensed therapist in California. In this podcast, we talk about psychotherapy, mental health topics, and have inspiring conversations. The information provided in this podcast is not substitute for mental health services. Any statements and opinions I make are representative of myself and separate from my employer. Please share this podcast with friends and family and provide us with feedback or suggestions for future episodes. With that said, thank you for tuning in. Now let's have a wonderful time. In today's episode, we are going to talk about who is a therapist and also what to look for on a therapist. I'm going to break it down into three sections. The first section is the must, things that a therapist must have in order to call themselves a therapist. The second section is the things that a therapist should have. This is like the bonus area, what to look for. And then the third section is who we are and who we are not when it comes to like the person that is behind the therapist. It'll make sense. Trust me. So let's start with the first section. These are the things, we'll call them things because we'll go one by one, that a therapist must have when you're looking for a therapist. The first thing is they should be registered, licensed. It uses different terms depending on where you live, but they should be registered or licensed with the board, the agency that oversees therapists in your state or the area where you live or country. And in my case is the California Board of Behavioral Sciences. They are the ones that oversee all the registrations and all the license of therapists in California. So if you want to provide psychotherapy in the state of California, you have to have a license or a registration, depending what your level is, through them, because they're the ones that oversee, they're the ones that monitor all psychotherapists in our state. In different states, the requirements are different, so each state here in the United States has its own board that oversees their therapies. So please check that the therapist that you are considering or that you're about to engage with in a therapeutic relationship, it's registered, licensed, but definitely register with the respective board, agency, or regulatory body in the area where you live that applies to you. The second, and hopefully the board or the agency can filter, they typically do, but there's always glitches. The therapist must be educated. They must have a degree that qualifies them to obtain their license, to obtain their registration. But not only educated, like in the master's or doctorate degree level, but that they're also trained and educated in the modalities or the type of therapies that they are using, because there are many different types of therapies, approaches, modalities out there. Two of the most popular ones right now is cognitive behavioral therapy and dialectical behavioral therapy, CBT, DBT, respectively. And anyone can claim to use CBT or DBT because there is not a mandatory training by the board to regulate these skills, this type of therapy. For example, in the US, we have the Beck Institute for CBT. They provide the training, they'll provide the supervision, and they will check the work of a therapist who is claiming to practice in CBT. But that is not a mandatory or a requirement from the board or the agency that regulates the license or the registration of the therapist. What does that mean? That means that technically anyone can say that they practice CBT because they can read a book, go to a few trainings, and claim that they know the skills. On the other side, another therapist can claim to be licensed, certified, trained, different words, but pretty much what they're trying to say is they went through the training through the official provider of that modality. If you go with a therapist who is trained in that mode of therapy, you will notice that their skill sets may be more advanced, but skill sets are a different subject because it's a debate whether if it's the therapist who is actually helping most of the time or if it's the skills or the approach that they're using. It's a debate. We'll talk about that probably in a different episode. So just keep that in mind. Anyone can claim to be using the skills. They can have a full certification, but whatever their case is, feel free to ask them what is the training that they have. And that's why I put that into the must section, because if someone is going to claim that they're using CBT and you ask them what is your formal training and they just cannot give you a straight up answer, it's probably not have the proper training. They're just claiming that they're using that approach. So feel free to ask them just straight up, where do you learn CBT? And that's it. So those are the must be registered. Obviously, they must have the education, the degree, the respective degree, and must be trained in whatever modality they're claiming to be practicing or skills that they're using. Those are the must. Now, to the next section. This is the should. They're not mandatory. Every therapist is different. But in my opinion, when you're sitting across the room from a therapist, this is what I think a therapist should look like, and to be able to provide to the patient. The first thing is a therapist must be empathetic. Now, this may feel like an obvious one, right? Like, well, shouldn't they be empathetic? Yes, but not all of them are, and not all of them are able to demonstrate it. And empathy in a therapeutic setting, it's not the typical empathy in like the world normal day type of setting. This means that the therapist sh- should not be going like, oh, I can see that you're sad, or oh, I know what that feels like. Not that type of empathy. Empathy in a therapeutic setting, from my definition, and my professor in grad school probably was the best person in explaining this. So I hope I give honor to Christian Malador and the way I'm going to explain empathy is empathy from a therapist is the therapist being able to understand and identify the feeling that the patient is expressing, and the therapist grabs that feeling and gives it back to the patient so that the patient can reflect on that and process that emotion. Sounds kind of confusing, but what it means is a therapist telling you, I can see that you're crying because you miss your deceased husband. Tell me more about that. And that provides the patient with the opportunity to reflect on that emotion. Why is it that is sadness? Why is she feeling sad? What does she miss about her husband that passed away? And grab that feeling again and reflect on it. And that makes the patient feel, first of all, it feels heard and acknowledged, and that the emotions are valid. But it also provides the opportunity to reflect on that feeling. Why is that feeling happening? Where's it coming from? So it's a skill. It's definitely a skill that takes practice. But an effective therapist that uses empathy very well will allow you as a patient to reflect on your emotions in a great way that just allows you, the patient, to process them and not just feel validated and hurt, but actually think about from your own, and not the therapist trying to find why is that feeling happening or where's it coming from. So a therapist should be empathetic. A therapist should be caring. Caring kind of seems like another obvious one, but in this case, that you feel that the therapist cares about you as a patient and as a person. It's a tricky balance, but the best way to explain it is you're not just another appointment for your therapist. You're not sitting across a person who is lecturing you and telling you what's going on, or painting a picture of your situation and then ask you to try this, try that, and go on with your life. But that you actually, feel care and protect it. Because as professionals, we have guidelines to protect our patients and to care for them. But, it also includes the way you're being treated, greeted, being attentive to the therapist being present, that you can see that the therapist is being present and listening to you. And they're not just trying to lecture you and move on with their day, like I say, but you feel that you're being listened to and that you have their undivided attention. And that they're caring for who you are and for your situation, especially if you're experiencing high risks behavior, that you feel like the therapist is providing you with the proper resources and help and support that you need. So therapists should be empathetic, should be caring, and the next one should be objective. Our job as a therapist is not to sway our patients one way or the other, but it's to allow them for themselves to see the weight of their choices. If I choose A, these are the consequences. If I choose B, these are the consequences. If I continue on this path, this is the long-term consequences. When I mean consequences, I know consequences has a negative connotation, but consequences, it just means the results of your behavior. So a therapist will allow you to take a step back and guide you through the decision-making process, and for you to come up with what's going to be the best choice for you to help you improve your mental state and your lifestyle. In my opinion, this is just my opinion, I don't believe therapists should have a side or opinions or ideas or beliefs that should influence their practices as a professional. Now, personally, our personal life is our personal life. Whatever we believe in, religion that we practice, political views, stance on different debates, those are our personal beliefs. And the moment we put ourselves in the role of a therapist, those should be stand aside. And as a professional, we should be objective and let our patient come up with the best decisions for them to improve their mental health status. Now, hopefully, an objective therapist can also provide them with feedback and proper guidance, and as they're exploring the decision, for us to let them know, like, okay, are you aware of these consequences? Are you aware of this reality? Are you willing to go through that? And if they're okay, self-determination, that's what it's called. If they're okay with those consequences, we let them make the decision. On a side note, we also have legal mandates. So if a patient is willing to take a decision that violates the rights of others or hurts them, we have a legal mandate to, take action. So we're not always just standing in the background letting them do whatever they want. But no, we also have legal mandates that guides us in case of our patients trying to make a decision that is not the best for others or for themselves in the matter of safety. So therapists should be empathetic, caring, objective. And then this last two, a therapist should challenge you as a person, as a patient, should challenge you to grow, to find your feelings and what's the root of it. And through an objective approach, challenge you to change your behavior, because at the end of the day, that's the goal of therapists, is to change the pattern that got us into our situation or our mental state, or the diagnosis that got us into our current state, is to challenge you and help you grow. And grow comes through challenge, changing, modifying, trial and error. All these things, this is all part of the grow of the therapeutic relationship. So a therapist should challenge you, and then just kind of go together and help you grow in a professional manner. This is a tricky one, because as a patient, we expect our therapist to be professional and have a professional stand and demeanor, but you'll be surprised. You will be surprised. It kind of embarrasses me to say this, but there are some therapists who do not have a professional practice, outlook, presentation. So a therapist should be professional, when they're in their therapist role. Again, their personal life, it's their personal life. But when they're a therapist in the therapist role, they should be professional. So therapists should be empathetic, caring, objective, and should challenge you to grow and have a professional presentation. The following section, the last section, is who we are and who we are not as therapists. Who we are. Well, we're humans. We're as humans as our patients are. I know I said that the personal and the professional life should be, separate entities when it comes to being an objective therapist. But we're also humans, and we get tired, and we take time off once in a while, and we also have feelings, and we also have stress, and we also, have our own mental health. So we're humans. We make mistakes. We can give an opinion that our patient may disagree with. We may feel tired, and honestly zone out once in a while. So if we do that, forgive us. We're also learning to manage our lives and be able to provide the best services. But in that, it just as human beings, we're gonna make mistakes, forgetting to make a phone call, forgetting to do something, forgetting a detail of the life of the patient that could be important. And we try not to do it much, because there's some legal aspect as well. Like if we forget to write down certain things, or if we forget to make certain reports, those things that we're legally bound to do, which like try our best to be on top of it. But there are some things that comes with being a human, and sometimes we can make mistakes, and we can look as we're tired, especially lately in the pandemic. Like there's a lot of work and help for health providers to understand that as well, that the person that is sitting up across from you and helping you, they're also human, and they also have their own experiences. And some days your therapist may seem like they're having an off day, and they may be. And we also take time off. Once in a while, we may take time off from therapy, from sessions, and just understand that we'll also try our best to provide coverage for our patients, but we take time off. Now, who we're not future tellers. We're not fortune tellers. We cannot foresee the future. We cannot see what's going to happen in the future. What I'm trying to say is we don't know the answer for everything, and we don't know how everything's going to go, if things are going to work, if the skill is going to work. It all depends on the patient. If the patient does the work, things may work well, but it's not a guarantee. And that's why that relationship between the therapist and the patient is important, so that they can work things and create a better future for the patient. So we can't tell you everything that is going to happen in the future after therapy. Also, we're not mind readers. We cannot read minds. Through our education and training, we get pretty good at reading patterns and looking at what statistically a history of a person can lead them to. But we cannot read their minds. We cannot read the minds of our patients. That's why we need our patients to talk to us and tell us what's going on inside their mind, because we're not mind readers. We're definitely not. So That's who we're not. We're not fortune tellers. We're not mind readers. And lastly, we're not a know-it-all person. We don't know everything. So if we ask questions, it's because we want to know what's going on inside of the mind of the patient. And we want to get the full picture. So sometimes we may come out as noisy, or like, why are they asking so many questions? Like, well, that's part of our job. And then also, we may not have the answers for all the questions of the patient, but we'll try our best to find the answers and to gather as much information as possible. So we're not fortune tellers, we're not mind readers, and we're not know-it-all. And that's who we are and who we're not. Lastly, just like a side note, apart from the 3 parts, please be very, very, very careful of people claiming to provide therapy but cannot show or don't have the appropriate credentials to provide psychotherapy. With the word counseling and therapy, there's a lot of gray areas that some people take advantage of. So if someone is claiming that they're counseling you and doing therapy or spiritual guidance or direction or life coaching, just make sure, please, that if at any point they're claiming to be doing therapy, please be sure that they have the appropriate credentials, because the world out there nowadays, anyone can claim anything. So it's our job as patient, as consumers, to check that the person that is sitting across from us is the professional who they're claiming to be and have the training and credentials to provide the service that they're claiming to be providing. So please, just be really, really, really careful of people that are claiming to be providing therapy but can't show or don't have the current credentials or the appropriate credentials. And that's it. That is who a therapist is and what to look for in a therapist. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll see you in the next episode.